Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Foreman, and this is the MR 1980 Retro. And right next to this board, I actually have the original MR, four-time World Surfing Champion, Mark Richards, to talk a little bit about this board, giving the audience a little bit of a background on this board. Obviously, from the name, it was designed in 1980, well ahead of its time. If you look at this board, which the design, when they're making them new now, they're still making them exactly like this. The design is 36 years old, and you're seeing now a lot of shapers over the last few years go in this same direction. And you know, is this thing is it a time machine? Did it get in a time tube and travel that far forward in time, or was Mark just really far ahead of the curve at the time? So it's great to have Mark in the shop here and talk a little bit about this board. We just did a review on the 78 Retro, and this board in general is just a little bit narrower throughout, but we're going to let Mark get more into the details about this board. And we'll start out, Mark. How did you were surfing on the 78 and thinking in your head, okay, how do I make this board better? You know, where did it go from there?
Well, what happened, it was just an end, because I was surfing competitively and I was trying to win events and win world titles. It was sort of an endless quest for performance. Like, there was no amount of performance was ever good enough. I was always striving for more. So with the evolution of the twin fins, I was always thinking, you know, the board will do this and it'll do that. How can I actually make it go better? And as we spoke about in the video about the 78s, most of the surf that the events were held in was very marginal. I think during 1980 there may have been, I think there were 4 events in Japan, which counted towards a world title, and we were really starved for surf in Japan, like over the years of the Japanese events. So I knew I needed something that was going to give me a little bit more performance in smaller surf. So I based the 1980 on all that was good about the 1978 in terms of like the rocker, you know, the deck contours, the V bottom, the flutes in the wings, the rail shape, the beak in the nose. And the only 2 changes I really made to it in terms of my personal size of the board was dropping from a 6'4" to a 6'2". I dropped the width from 21 inches wide on the 6'4" to 20 1/4 on the 6'2", and I dropped the thickness from 2 7/8 to 2 3/4. Those changes to the dimensions.
And then you paddled a lot harder.
Well, I was in prime physical condition, and I could actually paddle a lot better than I could now. And because all the volume is carried up into the nose, you can go reasonably short in these boards, and they paddle great. So the drop in dimensions and volume made it a lot more manoeuvrable and a lot freer in small surf. And I think the main thing I did was I took about 1/2 inch of nose curve out of it. So compared to the 1978, the nose on the 1980 is a lot narrower and the tail is a little bit more streamlined. So if you were comparing the 2 boards, if you were just surfing sort of, you know, really junky surf in that 2 to 3 foot range, then the 1978 would go better. But surf in the 3 to 5 foot range, where you were looking for a little more performance, you know, the 1980 would be the board. And really, this was the board that I won those 3 world titles on, like 1980, 91 and 1982. And in terms of design evolution, you know, I don't mean to sound egotistical, but this board went so good that there was, even though I tried, there was nothing I did to it during 81 and 82 that actually made it better. You know, I tried experimenting with like the tail width, the nose width, the rocker, the thickness distribution, the V's, the little flutes in the wings, and as good as everything that I did went, you know, I kept going back to the way it was in 1980, going, well, it's like I'm trying to fix something that's not broken. It just goes so good, I'll just continue to ride it as it is. So I think in terms of, you know, this style of twin fin, you know, a retro style twin fin, in terms of its evolution for me as a shaper, you know, 1980 was, I could say, the best I ever got it. And if I was to be marooned on a desert island with one of my retro twin fins, this is the board I would take, the 1980, because it'll cover, you know, such a great range of conditions and it goes so well. So yeah, it's sort of, for me, riding one of these is like putting on the most comfortable pair of shoes you've ever worn. It just, it just feels like it's
So talk to us about the fins on this board, obviously you could, like in the 78, we were just looking at twin only,
Yep.
dedicated twin. In 80, what was it that brought you to add the trailer box?
Well, I didn't actually add it in. That wasn't added in 1980.
Okay. It was still straight twin.
Yeah, in 1980 it was still a straight twin fin.
Okay.
And it wasn't really in. It's only been in sort of the last, I'm guessing about 10 years since I developed. There's a continuation from this board which is called a super twin, which is a modern version of this board with concaves, modern nose flip, rocker and rail. It's kind of like a thruster shape that widened out a little, still with the wing swallow tail. And in that model, which is in a fin system generation, we use fin systems, and I put the third plug in it because the set of fins comes with a little stabiliser.
Right.
And the stabiliser just gives it a little tiny bit more drive and just a little bit of that thruster feel. So what's been happening with the 1980s is that we've been getting guys who are ordering them in the original configuration with set fins. We're also getting guys and girls that order them with fin plugs in a twin fin configuration only.
Right.
And we're also getting people ordering them with the third set of plugs, so they can ride it as a pure twin fin or ride it with a little stabiliser in the tail.
Right.
And putting the little stabiliser in the tail, which isn't original, but people are doing it now, just gives you a little bit more scope in terms of the size of surf that you can ride it in.
So it'll give you a little bit more grip and
just
your surf?
Yeah, as silly as it sounds, like putting a little stabiliser fin in the tail, and they're only usually about that big, just gives it a little bit more, I guess, drive and direction. It possibly feels a bit stiff in small surf, but if you took off on a 4 or a 5 or a 6 foot wave, that stabiliser really helps.
And so the placement on these front boxes is still pure twin.
Pure twin.
So you can, even though it has this, you don't have to ride that if you don't want.
No, you don't. It's pure twin fin. If you just forget about that, it's a pure twin fin. And if this board was around in 1980, the shape and everything, the outline shape, like this is a 6.2, exactly the same dimensions as I was riding, 20 1/4 wide, 2 3/4 thick, which was my go-to board on the tour.
Right.
It was my number one board that I rode all year. I only had one of them, and it would have had glassed on fins, so that would really be the only difference. It may have had a polish finish, because in those days,
right, gloss and polish.
Yeah, gloss and polish was standard. A wet and dry finish, we didn't even know about wet and dry finishes.
Right.
If you'd seen a wet and dry finish in those days, you would say, "Gee, they forgot to finish it. What happened?"
Within a rush.
Yeah.
What about? Let's go like something a little bit less design oriented. What about like all the colors? Like you're known for the flash. From the logo to the sprays. Was it everything back then was that wild, or you just said, hey, I'm coming out, and this is what it's going to look like?
A little bit of both. I've always loved colour on boards, and I think that era through the 70s and the early 80s, there were a lot of coloured surfboards. Sean was riding that blue board. Wayne Rabbit Bartholomew had crazy sprays on the deck. I think from memory, most of the guys did have colour on the board. And, I've got clear boards now, but I used to think of a clear board as being kind of boring, plain white. And I just loved doing colours, and all those early boards, like the board in the Freeride movie and the 1980 Retro Twin, which had a red deck and one rail was green and the other was blue. Like I did those colours myself on them.
Yeah, there was colour, and it seemed like there was colour in everybody's boards, but it just sort of seemed like they were like a solid color with maybe like a rail or a pin line or something. Yeah. Where your stuff was, it was just loud, which was cool.
Yeah, I think I loved doing the colour designs, probably nearly as much as I loved shaping them.
Right.
It was just really fun to put colour on them. And then when I discovered fluoro colours, I think one of the trips to Japan, I discovered you could get fluoro, paints that you could put on surfboards. And then I just went really crazy, because I'm just going to make these things like neon bright.
Right.
I thought it was good competitively, because I thought the flash of colour when you were turning, like, always sort of looked good, especially on a darker day if you were riding a bright board, and the judges saw you come off the top. I thought that flash of colour might look a little more impressive than a clear surfboard. But yeah, I just kind of love colour. Even to this day, I love doing colour designs on the boards, and on my Instagram, there's a couple of posts of my sons doing colour designs on their boards. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And then flip it over again. Let's look at the bottom one more time. So when we were looking at the 78 twin, you were talking a little about the flute, how you kind of shape that down just to give it a little bit more bite out here. Is that still on that board?
Yeah,
on this board?
There's three prime ingredients that I think that make these work. The 78 and the 1980, and I think any retro style twin fin is one is the wing swallow, because the wing swallow actually gives you area under your back foot so it doesn't sink when it's small. And by having the wing flyer and narrowing the tail, it pulls the actual very end of the board in, so you have like a tighter tail, so when you're turning it's got good holding power, and a swallow like really bites into the water really well when you're turning. That coupled with the V bottom, which is quite extreme back here, it's probably like a ½ an inch deep if you could put a straight edge on it, that really helps the board go from rail to rail when you're turning. And coupled in with that for holding power when you're turning, because a twin fin is incredibly loose, is this little concave flute that goes down through here, really finds this area out. And this wing area, because it's been concaved out there and it has a little flute on the deck, it acts like a little fin on the rail, giving the board more holding power and more drive than it would have without that flute. So I think they're the three main ingredients, I think, for a successful twin fin is the wing swallow. You've got to have a deep V, you've got to have these flutes, and obviously the rocker's got to be good and the rails have got to be good and the rest of the outline has to be good. But if you get those three things right, then you're well on your way to having a good performing twin fin.
What about forward of here? Are we looking at concaves yet up here, or is that still not?
No, we hadn't. No, 1980 we didn't know about concaves.
Okay.
Everything was either flat bottoms or V bottoms. The bigger boards tended to have flat bottoms with just a very slight amount of V in the tail, but in terms of bigger single fins, but in terms of a twin fin, because of the extra width on a twin fin, the nose width, the centre width and the tail width, if the bottom was dead flat, it would tend to really like sit flat and suck on the water, and it would be really hard to get it to go from rail to rail. So the idea of the deep V was like a spine down the centre and something that would help the board roll from rail to rail. So this V starts at its deepest here, and it just gradually blends out as you go through the bottom, and it sort of finishes up around the front of the MR. There's just like really subtle V there. If you put a straight edge on it, you would notice that the rails dropped. So it's like under your back foot especially, and a little bit of V under your front foot, just so that with both feet, the board is like rocking on this centre plane going from rail to rail.
Right. And when, so you said that when you went to this board, you surfed a 6'2"?
Yeah.
Like these dimensions? What do you surf, when you surf this model now, what dimensions do you surf it in now?
Exactly the same.
The same still?
Yeah, 6'2", 20 1/4 wide, 2 3/4 thick. It's my, I've got one at home that I ride all the time. It's
to
got
our viewers, really
orange deck.
Are you riding the same dimensions that you were 36 years ago?
Exactly. But I'm very fortunate. I weigh the same as I did 36 years ago too. So.
I'm sorry, I cut you off in the middle. What were you saying?
I can't remember. What was I saying?
Either. We can edit this part out.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of video. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I know what I was saying. Mine at home, my 1980 that's sitting in the garage at home is 6'2", exactly the same dimensions as this, 20 1/4 inches wide, 2 3/4 thick, which is the same as the original board I rode back in 1980. And mine's got an orange deck with a green rail and a blue rail. They were two of the really popular sort of colour combinations from those days, and we've done quite a few of those. Red deck, green rail, blue rail, orange deck, green rail, blue rail. It's been a really popular redo of the colours, and that's the other thing that's happened with them is most of the time when someone custom orders one, they'll pick a spray from that era. Like it's not very often this is a more modern spray, but it's sort of rare to see a modern spray on it. Because most people, if they're doing a custom order of a 1980 or a 1978, they'll pick a graphic from that era, or a graphic that was on one of my boards in that era.
Right. You guys have any questions? Ashlyn? Osman? You guys have any questions?
Framing. Going for this ride, man. Not a question so far even. No, that was really.
We're good? We're wrap it?
All good?
Yeah? All right.
Yeah. You want to get us some photos out?
Yeah, we'll give you where were we? The board is like here, so just
Yeah.
go back to here.
That's it there?
Actually, how do you feel about like the more modern fish shapes? Like, how do you compare your original board to similar shape, you come out with more concave. Like, how do you feel about switching back and forth?
So Ryan, should I ask that question on film, just so it's not like coming out of left field?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mark, comparing this to some of the more modern boards that you're making now, like with a concave bottom, compare them. Like, what do you like? What do you don't like?
I like everything. I'm a spoiled. Excuse me. I like everything. I'm a spoiled shaper. I've got one of every model, and I've got like a ridiculous amount of surfboards in the garage. I've got more surfboards than one human should own. But being a surfboard shaper, I think, is like being a kid who works in a chocolate shop. You want to like sample everything. So I love making myself surfboards, and I've got everything from rounded square thrusters to round pin guns for big surf, to retro twins, to fishers and modern twins. But I think we're in, so to answer the question, I think we're in one of the best eras ever of surfboard design. Like if we go back, I can't remember how many years, but it was 10 years ago, I think that surfboard design was influenced way too much by what the guys on the Pro Tour were riding. And if you took what Kelly was riding, for example, those very narrow thrusters with a super flip in the nose and a ton of rocker in the bottom, not a lot of thickness in them. The boards went incredibly well under the feet of the best surfers in the world, but for fun recreational surfers, there's no two ways around it. They were hard boards to ride in the average conditions that people surf in. So I think what we've seen in the last few years of this sort of revolution, where we're seeing lots of longboards in the water, wider thrusters, a resurgence in twin fins, retro twin fins, and modern twin fins. We're seeing quads and eggs and round nose fishes. There's so much diversity of what is there. Like just looking in the racks here, there's incredible diversity. There's a high performance lost shortboard there, and I'm not sure who made it, but there's like a short sort of mini Mel shape there, which would go great in small surf. So for a recreational surfer, I don't think there's ever been a better time in surfboard design, because there's everything from your high performance shortboard right through to all those boards I mentioned. So depending on your surfing ability and the area that you live in, there's absolutely no excuse for someone not walking out of a surf shop with a board that suits their surfing style, their surfing ability, and the conditions they work in. It's the
that
best,
they can actually have fun on.
Yeah,
like not
so they have
cool
fun.
With, but actually have fun on.
Because that's the whole thing. You don't want to walk down the beach and go, geez, this board looks cool, but I can't ride it. You want to walk down the beach with not worrying about whether the board works cool. You want to walk down the beach with a board that you can actually paddle out and catch waves and have fun on, because that's the whole reason we surf, and that's the whole essence of going surfing is to go out and have fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like in that time period that you're talking about, like in this last few years, like it's almost like they unchained the dimension set, and then they were allowed to do 21 again, because before it was taboo to even go above 20. And now, like on those boards, like on those beanbags, those are like 23 inches wide. And in that super, slivered out elf shoe potato chip era, like everything was 18 inches wide, and 19 and a half was wide. And now it's all 20, 21, 22, 23, and the thickness, the thickness of like when you made this board 2 3/4, that was even, that was off the chart for a while. Like they're making the big guys like my size, they were making them like, oh, I'm going to make you a 2.5. But it wasn't even 2.5. It was 2.5 here.
2.5 in the middle, but
2.5 over here.
It's probably like 2 inches on the rail or something.
So I mean, it's nice to have all those dimensions come back. And like what we touched on, like on the 78, like have a board that'll work on a Saturday or a Sunday. And then you touched on your shaping, and I mean, how active are you shaping now? Like how many boards do you think you make a year?
Not a lot. I'd probably, shape maybe between 5 and 10 boards a week.
Okay.
I think we'd be lucky to make 500 boards a year. Like I'm a very small fish in the sea of surfboard making, compared to some of the bigger manufacturers. So it's. Yeah.
Do you still enjoy it?
Yeah, I love doing it. I find it kind of really creative. And those are the things like when I was going to school, I enjoyed woodwork classes the best. because you're actually making stuff and it was doing something creative. I find it kind of challenging because no matter how good you think you are, you can always continue to improve. There's no point where you go, that's as good a board as I can ever make. I think every shaper around the world, you know, if they finish shaping on Wednesday, they probably go into the shaping room on Thursday going, I think I can make a better board than I made on Wednesday. So, you know, I think your skill as a shaper continues to improve and evolve. And I think you continue to learn things, and you sort of strive for excellence all the time. And the wonderful thing about it is you get, you know, really incredible like feedback from people. I think, you know, it's probably similar to, you know, when you on the retail floor when you're selling people boards and someone comes back and they, or someone you know, and they go, you know, I really love that board you sold me. I think it's helped my surfing or improved my surfing, and I'm having a ton of fun on it.
Right.
There's not a lot of avenues in life where there's not a lot of sporting equipment that is, you know, has so much hand-done work in it that a surfboard has. So it's something that kind of gives people, you know, fun and fun in their recreational time. Mm-hmm. So you get all this like, you know, great feedback because in a way you're making a product that is enhancing people's like fun and recreational time, which is a really special thing to be able to do.
That's the best part of their life,
yeah,
really. So you're enhancing the best
great.
part of their life.
Yeah.
Well, we really want to thank you for stopping here, traveling from Australia all the way out to the end of the earth here in Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. It's an honor to have you here in the Real
great.
Board
Thank
Loft.
you. Good to be here.
If anybody out there has any questions about the MR 1980 Retro or any of the other MR models, you can give us a call at the shop, 252-987-6000, or check us out online, realwatersports.com/surfing. Thanks for tuning in.